The next installment of the DNVR Avalanche Season Preview finally starting to make it into some of the bigger names on the Avs lineup. We're going to be talking about not the primary pieces, but secondary stars. Is that the right term to use here? Secondary top six players, certainly.
Yeah, I think the concept of second stars is going to be something that we get very familiar with in Colorado over the next few years. Over the last decade, it's basically been star players and bums. And there's like a world in between that we haven't seen a ton of in Avs land. And I think that these are the guys that we're gonna, that are gonna be part of a regular roster churn. You have to find these guys. They have to be effective. They have to fit what you do, but they also have to be cost effective. They have to be guys that have deals that, that easily pay for themselves, where you look at that guy's contract and you say, oh, that's easily worth it. Or, man, that's a really good deal. It can't be one where you're like, we're stretched a little thin here to try and get this guy. They have to be important complementary players, but not role players. They're the guys in between those two.
First up on that list is a guy who was just signed to a deal over the offseason in Andre Burakovsky. Berkey had a complete breakout year with the Avs. His 1 year with the Avs, he put up career high numbers in every single category, as we can bring up his statistics here. This is the player the Avs were hoping they were getting in Andre Burakovsky right here.
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back seasons of 12 goals in Washington before they finally decided to move on. 58 games played in Colorado, 20-goal season. And that was the big appeal. The guy's a great shooter. We said that when he got acquired, if he can get 200 shots on goal, he'll get to 20 goals, and Colorado will have the player that they want. They will have a star on their hands. They will have the perfect complement on a second line that they've been looking for a long time. And that's exactly what happened. We saw he didn't get to 200 shots on goal last year. He had 103. So
shut the roof off the building a little bit.
Yeah, and so you will say, hey, look, he had by far the highest shooting percentage of his career at 19.4%, which is obscenely high and unsustainable, and we should get that out of the way right now. However, he's never shot below 10.8% in the NHL and only has the 1 year shooting below 12. So this is really just about volume. If he continues to shoot the puck, he's got a good enough shot that he's gonna be great. And if you go and you watch all 20 of his goals last year, I'm not sure that there's an ugly one in there.
A lot of bar downs. Yeah.
His ugliest goal as an Av might honestly be the one that he scored in the playoffs on an open net where he almost missed the open net and he ended up banking it in off the post on the far side.
Yep.
As Darcy Kemper was trying to move post to post. So that might have been his ugliest goal. Otherwise, everything was, bar down, top shelf snipes, and just him making goaltenders look bad. Not a lot of deflections, not a lot of rebounds, not a lot of banging away at pucks in front of the net. There's just not very much of that. He's just a great shooter, and that's his profile. It's what he does, and he did it at an extremely high level last year. I think the thing that surprised me the most about it was what a solid playmaker he ended up being.
Especially as the season went on, he all of a sudden found this knack. Maybe it's just a little bit of gelling with these guys after playing for the Avs for a little while, but he started making some very crisp, clean, and at times even nice, fancy passes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he had 25 points in each of the 2 years before getting to Colorado. And last year, 25 assists. Matched the point total from each of those 2 years just in assists. And then kept it up in the postseason. 15 games played in the postseason, 10 assists to go with 7 goals. I mean, we're talking about him as a second star And he was on pace for over a 60-point season in the regular season and was over a point per game in the playoffs. And it wasn't like he got fat off a 6-point night, where it was one big day carried all of his production, and half of his production comes in one game or whatever. He was consistently producing throughout the postseason and was one of the few guys beyond Colorado's top line that was dangerous in the Dallas series.
For sure. It's crazy. 4 years ago, there wasn't a single player on the Avs with a 60-point season. Now 60 points is good enough for secondary star.
Yeah, I mean now it's Andre Burakovsky. What, they're arguably their fourth or fifth, at most their fourth best forward.
Yep. The big question for Burakovsky is easy. Do it again. Because you've done it once in your NHL career now, and it's great. I think a lot of signs point to repeatability here, but you haven't done it until you've done it.
Yeah, it's funny how many of these guys, when we talk about their big questions, it's just do what you did last year. But last year's Avs team had a lot of big breakouts, a lot of career years.
Yep. Where
trying to get that many high level of seasons out of that many players is hard to do. It's one of the things that I'm low key concerned about with this next season is that players are human. They're inconsistent. They go through ups and they go through downs. And, players all have up and down seasons and major outliers. And one of the challenges in building a cup contender is getting through those ups and downs and surviving the guys who you thought were going to give you certain base level of production and don't. Where do you get it then from somebody else? Because if you don't, then you have a really big problem on your hands. The Avs are downright reliant on Andre Burakovsky now. Last year, it was, let's just see what this guy can do. We're hopeful that this guy can fill a certain role. He stepped up and did exactly that. But when you look at his career, it's funny because we talk about Devon Taves and Pavel Francouz and Ryan Graves, these guys who all have short track records, and it's like, okay, well, you did it exactly once. Now you need to go out and do it again. But a guy like Burakovsky, when you've got 6 years in the NHL and you have one where you were downright excellent and all the others are varying levels of mediocre, it almost becomes harder to believe that guy can do it again.
It's, certainly. And there are other factors that go into that limited playing time in Washington, yada, yada, yada. But when you have a track record, you have a track record. I mean, the expectations are that you're going to continue playing the way you've played until you buck the trend. And you have to have a breakout year to start that. But way more players in the history of hockey have one good year and then go back to just who they are, as compared to finding a new normal.
It's definitely true, but I think that the big caveat with Burakovsky is opportunity.
I agree, and that brings us to our expectations. With the opportunity he's gotten in Colorado, the Avs essentially need him to become a top complimentary goal scorer in the league.
Yep, when we talked about Brandon Saad, 21 goals in 58 games last year. Andre Burakovsky, 20 goals in 58 games last year.
Yep.
They need those guys to do it again.
Yep.
They need those goals out of those guys. It's a 56-game season. We don't have to look at their numbers and try and prorate any of it. They played the games last year that they're going to play this year. Their stat lines match up. Burakovsky has got to do this again. He's got to be that dynamic guy on the second line. He's got to be kind of a game breaker for them, because if he does that, you're an opposing coach. You're already having nightmares about Nathan McKinnon. Now Cale Makar is giving you fits. But when they roll out, okay, you've got certain things that you're going to try and do. The good news is that Makar and McKinnon are often on the ice together. So if they survive that shift, okay, great. Now they can try and do some attacking of their own, right? If Andre Burakovsky is the Andre Burakovsky of last year, you have another problem to contend with.
Yeah, coaches are pulling out the prayer beads at that point. Like,
Right. I mean, outside of, Minnesota, maybe Nashville, Carolina, you're not looking at very many D-cores around the league that have such a high level of a second pairing that they like that matchup against an Andre Burakovsky, Brandon Saad, Nazem Kadri second line.
yep. It's just hard to match up against a team with the top six that deep, particularly offensively.
When you look at Burakovsky, when you look at that second line, Burakovsky, Kadri, and Saad, you're realistically talking about a low end top line.
Yeah. All of those guys are capable of being 1.5 line players.
Right. Those are all guys that on worse teams could easily be top line players.
Yep. And you mentioned it, Nazem Kadri, our other second star for this Colorado Avalanche team. Of course, you can catch the Brandon Saad conversation in the New Guys video. Be sure to check that out if you haven't. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to catch all of our previews and other videos as well. For Kadri, I think it's pretty established what he brings. The Avs knew what they were getting when they brought him in. They more or less got that last year with 36 points in 51 games here. Nearly another 20-goal player. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that, again, just do it again. He's always been a goal scorer in his career, multiple 30-goal seasons, was on that pace last year. This is a guy that brought so many elements to Colorado that they needed. Yep. I mean, completely ignoring the business side of this and that they got a legit 2C that does a little bit of everything for them for under $5 million in salary on a 3-year, what's essentially a 3-year deal from Toronto, ignoring all of the business aspect of this, which is very much in Colorado's favor. This guy did everything for the Avs. He was the perfect addition to the team, and we talked about it when they acquired him. There was a reason you and I had targeted him as a guy for them to look at in the offseason.
Yep.
It just made too much sense that he was the guy sticking out as the sore thumb in Toronto that they needed to move on from. It worked out great for Colorado, less so for the Maple Leafs, but that's life in the NHL. Kadri, between becoming their top faceoff guy, which was something they did need, we kind of downplay that as a major role. But when you do get situationally and late into games and you have a defensive zone faceoff, you want a guy that goes out there and wins draws.
Yeah. And
Kadri did that at a very high level last year. And not only that, but he brought an attitude. He brought an engagement and a snarl to their lineup that they needed.
That's what sold it for me. So often we talk to people who say, oh, the Avs need more grit. The Avs need more of that. Nazem Kadri. Look no further than Nazem Kadri for that. The dude he can be a pest. Other players do not like playing against him. And if push comes to shove, he can beat the suspension out of a guy.
Yep. Ryan Lindgren of the Rangers was all set to get suspended for his headshot on Jonas Donskoy, but received such a beating from Kadri that he was hurt. Kadri hurt him for a couple of games in the NHL, just kind of said, well, I mean, you're hurt anyway.
Good enough.
Kadri kind of, he was the Department of Player Safety on that one. He took matters into his own hands. And that's the kind of stuff that in a locker room turns you into, the stuff of legend in there. That especially when you're a new guy, there has to be a this guy's one of us moment, right? That was a big time moment for Kadri. Not that his track record in the NHL, he needed to do a lot of proving himself. He really just came in and just needed to continue to be who he's always been. He did that. He did it very well. And honestly, he's a great fit for what they do.
As the fact that Brandon Saad is only 28 continues to amaze me, the big question for Nazem Kadri is the fact that he is the oldest member of the Avs top six. At 30 years of age, can he keep it up? Can he continue to play his style of hockey without slowing down?
we've seen the last 2 years, even his first year in Colorado, but his last year in Toronto, which there are some caveats there because he was playing 3C.
Yep.
He was playing a very specific role that he's not in Colorado. But even last year in Colorado, we've seen there's a little bit of slippage starting to happen in the two-way game. The defensive game is starting to get a little bit worse. The offensive game probably, I mean, he's probably not going to throw up another 30-goal season in his career. I would say it's just unlikely.
Doesn't seem likely for sure.
You know, he was when that was happening, he was mostly playing as Toronto's top center.
Yep.
Now with the firepower that they've had since, and you know, he's now behind Nathan McKinnon. Alex Newhook is very obviously coming for his job now. He's kind of in a spot where we start to see guys show signs of aging, and some of the underlying stuff I think has started to hit. You know, the fancy stats. He's been a better fancy stats player in his career than he was last year.
Yep.
Right now, I would say as long as he continues to be league average defensively,
fine.
They're in a great spot with him.
Yep.
It's the concern that he takes a bigger step backwards, you know, that the aging really starts to kick in. I mean, hey, we saw with Carl Soderberg, it never really happened. But Soderberg was also a big guy that did not play nearly the same kind of physically engaged style as Kadri. Kadri plays hard, and it takes a toll on a guy's body because he goes at it really hard, and he has a very physical element to his game that, you know, it just stands to reason when you hit guys more, you have more wear and tear. You put yourself in a position to wear down a little faster, to experience, you know, more on the injury front. There's just it's not a major question. It's not like 30 years old. Oh my God, he's over the hill. But this is the age where we start to see guys really start to show signs of slowing down. I think that's really the only Kadri concern I have.
I mean, especially for a player who creates so much of his offense individually.
Yeah.
If he wears down, if he loses that half step, if his hands just don't quite have it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and those moves stop working, you could see his offense just gone.
Well, when we saw, you know, obviously the much older version, but we saw late career Milan Hajduk, the hands had started to go just enough that he wasn't able to be the same dynamic offensive player. Yep. Now, again, Hajduk was significantly older than 30 when that happened.
For sure.
So this could be a thing that, like, look, to be honest, when we were going through this list and these previews, there wasn't a whole lot about Kadri that we had a question mark about. He is who he is. He continues to be that guy. He's been that guy for a long time. The only real question is at some point, age is going to become a factor. We just don't know when. So this will probably be his question next year, too.
Yep. When age doesn't affect him this year, that'll be his question for next year. His expectations that we have here as well, kind of AJ already highlighted. Easy to throw this guy out in situational spots. Need him to take a face off? Great. They already use him there extremely often. And he just continues to create a secondary line for the Avs that coaches don't have an answer to.
Look, he had a slow start to the postseason last year.
Yep. And
we saw it with Colorado. Like, he was, you know, it was when he was not an offensive factor for them, they just looked different.
Yeah.
They were not as scary.
That lack of threat from anyone but the top line.
Yeah. And on the power play, he was great last year. I mean, he was the guy mostly just doing the dirty work, standing in front of the net, you know, just swatting at pucks that bounce off of goaltenders and defensemen.
Yep.
You know, that's what he was doing, but it was not to see his impact was significant in the postseason because when he was not on, the Avs just
they felt it.
Were not as good.
Yep. Pretty much.
They're so dynamic. Part of what makes them so dynamic offensively is that they have a guy with Kadri's abilities coming off the bench and playing 20 minutes. You know, that he can give them the kind of minutes that he was. You know, he plays right in that 18 or so minutes per game for them, and he's a perfect complement to the speed and power of Nathan MacKinnon too.
Yep. Well, we just played 20 minutes on 2 secondary stars, so don't ever let anyone tell you that depth is not important. If you want even more content on these guys and anyone else for Avalanche previews, be sure to head on over to thednvr.com, where we have it covered from all angles, articles, tape reviews, these videos, and more. You name it, you can find it all there, including training camp updates. So thednvr.com, consider subscribing and supporting us. We got more players to get to, so we will see you in the next preview.